Okay, good morning everyone. This will be my video lecture in Camillian Values and Norms. Today is October 11, 2021. It's a Monday. Now it's a Monday and this lecture is of course intended for both Block A and Block B. So we will continue with our discussion about norms, and previously last week, we talked about the different types of norms. No, we talked about the different types of norms. There were four. This is just a review. The first is what we call the folkways. No, folkways are the customs that are being followed in society. The second one is what we call the uh, taboos, no, taboos. Or instead of taboos, let me check the second one. The second one is what we call the mores. No, mores. These are, of course, when we talk of mores, we are talking about moral standards. Then we have taboos, and then thirdly, we have what we call the laws. No, the most formal of the types of norms will be this, because these are codified rules. No? Codified rules. When we say codified, they are written rules. Okay. So today we take up other classifications. No, other classifications of norms. So those are the types, but they are also classified in some other ways, correct? The first classification is what we call formal, no? Formal norms. Formal norms. When we talk of formal norms, these are written or before we take formal norms. I'd like to put it first with regard to personal norms. No, personal norms first. When we talk of personal norms, we are talking about those that are inherently residing in an individual's capacity. No, when we talk of personal norms, these are norms that reside only in the individual. No, when we say personal norms, the personal norms of an individual may be different from the norms that are being embraced by other individuals. So they are highly personal, they reside only in one person that will guide. These are the rules or expectations being observed by the individual himself. Example for personal norms. An example of this is, say, for instance, if part of your norm would be to conduct exercises every morning, no? Conduct exercises or do exercises every morning. So this is a part of your personal norm every morning. Or you may also say that you made a New Year's resolution not to smoke anymore. New Year's resolution. No? New Year's resolution not to smoke anymore, or to quit smoking. No? So these ones are what we call personal norms because they pertain to you as an individual, no? Personal norms, as opposed to what we call the second classification, which we are after, social norms. When we talk of social norms, of course this involves the rules and expectations that are required of you in your society, in your community. And these social norms are what sociologists call merely as norms. No, when we talk of norms, we are talking about this, the social norms, because the sociologists would recognize that social norms are important in our society or in our community because they bring about what we call social order. Why do these norms bring about social order? Well, precisely because you are guided by appropriate behavior that has been accepted, for that you need to conform, because these are the norms that are observed and accepted in our society. So social norms, or simply we call that as norms. When we talk of norms, we are talking about social norms. Okay? So I'd like you to read what are social norms, what are the examples of social. Okay, for instance, example of this would be crossing a pedestrian lane. No? If there exists a pedestrian lane, you cross the street or the road by using the pedestrian. Okay? This is an example of a social norm. Or another social norm is when you go to a restaurant, for instance, okay, it is always the norm that you have to fall in line in case there are so many customers. No, you have to fall in line, wait for your turn until you are served. Diba? That is the usual one. That is the usual behavior that you do when buying something in the restaurant, especially in Chowking or in Jollibee. So those are social norms that are accepted, and people are required to observe the same for purposes of order, for purposes of peace, for purposes of observing what we call a system. No? So these are social norms, and the objective would be order, peace, and of course the observance of the proper system. Okay, so I'd like to move fast because we are running out of time. So the third classification is what we call formal norms. No, formal norms. When we talk of formal norms, of course, these are written. These are codified, and an example of this would be the laws that we have, no? The manuals that you follow, no? And even the codes. Remember, these are strictly embedded in what we call laws, in what we call manuals, in what we call codes, and any other written instrument. And because they are written, these are what we call a little bit strict when it comes to observance. Why? Why do we have to strictly observe the formal norms? Well, of course, basically because these are embodied in a written instrument like a law, no, or a manual. You could just imagine if you violate any law or any manual, then people would think that you are eccentric, or people would think that you are somebody who is not following the rules. So formal rules or formal norms are written rules, no? Written rules that have been reduced by usually the ones who draft or craft the written rules are people in authority, no? It's very formal, so definitely it demands also a strict observance of the norm. Okay, next would be, if we have formal norms, then the opposite would be what we call informal norms. No? Informal norms. Now, these ones, when we talk of informal norms, we are talking about the casual behavior that are acceptable. No? These are usually unwritten. No? If we have so many formal norms, the more that we have informal norms, because in everyday life, of course, we are observing a certain pattern of behavior which we call normal. Remember that norms are the usual and customary rules and expectations that are considered normal. No, normal, because that is what is accepted by society. Okay, moving on. After what we call informal norms, no? Now, if you ask, which ones are greater in number? Is it the formal norms or informal norms? I will say that it has to be the informal norms. Mas marami ito, informal norms. Then, the fifth is what we call prescriptive norms. Prescriptive, meaning just like a prescription. If it's a prescriptive norm, we are talking about bringing about positive behavior. No? Positive behavior. That this type of norm urges an individual to do a positive behavior as opposed to what we call proscriptive. Remember, there is only one letter that differentiates one from the other. No? Proscriptive norms. When we talk of prescriptive norms, what we are after here would be negative behavior, the things that you ought not to do. No? The things that you ought not to do. Now, we go to this prescriptive. Prescriptive, example of this is, say for instance, cross the street by using the pedestrian lane, no? Or raise your hand when you want to recite. So those are prescriptive. We urge positive behavior. For prescriptive norms, example of this would be do not cheat, no, negative. Do not cheat. Or do not cross the street. Do not cross the street if there is a vehicle that is running along the highway. No, never cross the street while vehicles are moving or running. No, those are prescriptive norms. What we call prescriptive norms. The difference would be one is positive and the other would be negative. Now, we go to the differences between norms and what we call values, diba? You just read what is in the book, no? It is page 25. I think you have to memorize the differences between values and norms. So let us take some of them. Of course, values, when we talk of values, we are talking about general guidelines, no? That general guidelines for your behavior, no? Appropriate behavior, for appropriate behavior. General guidelines for appropriate behavior. Whereas norms would be what we call specific, no? Specific rules and expectations, no? Diba? Specific. So one is general and the other is specific. Guidelines, here rules. Now, values would pertain to what we call it is the end, no? End or ends. And this one is the means. No? Means to achieving your end. Take that, no? One is your end or ends, the other is the means. Diba? Next would be, if you will notice, this actually are general guidelines, no? And the other one, norms, would be an expression of the values that you embrace. So being an expression of values, this means that they are internalized values. They are actually internalized values. Because you express through your actions, no? And actions will be reduced through norms. Okay? So what else? What are the other differences? Okay, when we talk of values also, we are talking about what are important to you as an individual. What are important. So because we are talking about importance, there is a hierarchy of importance. Whereas here, we talk about norms are as some things that are usual, no, necessary, and acceptable. And because they are usual, necessary, and acceptable, they are considered as what are normal, no, because norms. Okay, so those are just some of the differences, but I'd like you to memorize the entire, no, the entire topic on the differences in page 25 of your book. Okay, so your assignment for Wednesday would be, why do we have to institutionalize values and norms? Why? Why do we have to institutionalize? I think we will be able to finish chapter 2 within the week. So we proceed with chapter 3 next week already. Okay, thank you and good afternoon everyone.